In this next section, we're going to cover the pickleball court. We're going to give you some terms that you're going to hear out there, and we'll go over the rules that are most important for you to know right now. Let's start with the pickleball court. CJ and I are standing on a traditional, dedicated pickleball court. First thing you might notice about a pickleball court is made up of two halves. We have this side.
And this side.
Two sides. Each side is identical. 22 feet long by 20 feet wide.
You'll notice on the court that there are 3 lines around the outside of the court and 2 lines on the inside of the court. On the outside of the court, this line behind me, right by Tony, is the baseline. The 2 lines to the side of the court are appropriately named the sidelines.
The area outside of these lines, the baseline and the sidelines, is the out of bounds. So if the ball lands in this light blue zone out here, the one, not the one in there, but the one out here outside of the lines, that is considered out of bounds. Importantly in pickleball, the lines that CJ pointed to are considered part of the court, the inside of the court. If the ball lands on the lines, the ball is in.
As I mentioned before, there are 2 lines on the inside of the court. This is called the center line. It divides the court into 2 rectangles. Those rectangles are important on the serve and the return, and we'll talk more about those when we talk about the shots.
The other line on the inside of the court that CJ mentioned is 7 feet away from the net. It runs parallel to it. This is the non-volley line. This line delineates a zone that is called the non-volley zone. This area up here, this light blue. On a lot of courts like these, this area will be a different color, and on some courts, particularly indoor courts, this color may be the same color as the rest of the court. But this non-volley line is a really important line that you're going to get to know really well. You'll sometimes hear it referred to as the kitchen line, and this area is the kitchen zone. And we're going to explain that more to you in a little bit.
The last thing that you need to know about is the net. The net divides the 2 halves of the court. Keep in mind, we want to avoid the net. We don't want to hit balls into the net. Now, if a ball hits the net and comes over onto our side of the court, we want to make sure that we play that ball. So an easy way to think of it is play any ball that comes onto your side of the court.
So you've already heard some of the terms that we use, like the kitchen, out calls, and things like that. Here's some other terms that you might find helpful as you start down your pickleball journey.
When the game begins, you'll typically hear the score called as 0-0 start. More commonly now, you're hearing it called 0-0-2. That indicates the beginning of the game.
Another term you'll hear out there is side out. Side out means when one team has lost the serve and the serve is switching from one end of the court to the other end of the court.
Another thing that's unique to pickleball is typically at the end of the game, everyone comes to the net and does what's called a paddle tap. The paddle tap is a sign of respect and a thank you for being on the court with me.
You can also use a paddle tap when you're playing with a partner. You can tap paddles between rallies. You'll see that pretty common. Paddle tapping is a super cool thing to do. There's other terms and other sort of mannerisms that you'll hear out there or learn as you play. Enjoy the game and they'll come natural. The first shot you're going to hit in any pickleball rally that you play is going to be the serve. So I'm going to give you the rules for the serve now. There are 2 types of serves that you can hit. One is called the volley serve, which is basically where you toss the ball and hit it before the ball bounces. That's one type of serve. The other type of serve is the drop serve. In the drop serve, you're going to let the ball drop out of your hand. It'll bounce, and then you'll hit it after it has bounced. Each serve has its own rules. We recommend, if you have never played a racket sports before, even if you have, drop serve is going to be the easier one to learn, and it's a super good way to serve, super easy way to serve and have a nice consistent serve. For the drop serve, the rule is, as I mentioned, that you must drop it, it'll bounce, then you'll hit it. The only rule you really have to worry about there is that you don't push it down like this, and you also can't toss it up like this to let it bounce. You have to hold it out and release it. That's why it's called a drop serve, and then you can hit it pretty much however you want. The other one, the in-air, the volley serve, that one has a couple of different rules. The main thing there is hit the ball underneath your waist. Navel is the rule, but waist is better. Hit it underneath your waist in an upward motion, and you're going to be fine on the volley or in-air serve. No matter which serve you choose, you're going to serve from this side of the court diagonally into that rectangle over there. So if I'm serving from here with an in-air or volley serve, I will serve it like that. That is an in-air or volley serve. If I wanted to use a drop serve, I would do a drop serve, and I'm still going to serve cross court. So I'm going to hold it out here. I'm going to drop it and then serve it into that box. Whether you're using the volley serve or the drop serve, one rule that applies to both serves is that your foot must be behind the baseline at the time that you contact the ball. So at the time you hit the ball, if your foot was here, this would be a fault. Your foot needs to be behind this line at the time of contact. And there's also an imaginary line that extends from the sideline and from the center line all the way back. You must be inside of those lines at the time that you strike the ball. For the drop serve, the ball does not need to bounce outside of the baseline. It can bounce on the inside of the court as long as my foot stays here. If I drop it, I can hit my serve.
Another rule that you'll hear at the courts is called the 2 bounce rule. So for this, I'm on what's called the serve side. I'm the serving team. And that half of the court would be the return side. After the serve, the ball needs to bounce once on the return side, and it needs to bounce again on the serve side before we can hit a volley. And a volley is simply any ball that's hit from the air. Let me show you this to you when it's done incorrectly. I'm the serve team. And I came up and I hit the ball out of the air. I did not allow that ball to bounce. That would now be a fault on my team. That's why you see the serve team, both players on the serve team will be standing at the baseline at the time that the serve is made. And when you look at the return team, you'll see one player at the non-volley zone line, and you'll just see the second player behind the baseline ready to receive the serve. So once that player hits the return from the baseline back over to the serve side, the serve team allows that to bounce one time, and then they hit that shot. Then a ball can be volleyed or hit from the air.
The last rule you need to understand is the non-volley zone rule. You recall from earlier when we were showing you the court that there's this area that's 7 feet from the net that's delineated by this line. This area here is called the non-volley zone, also called the kitchen. The way you want to think about this area and the rule that applies to this area is that you cannot volley the ball when you're standing inside this zone. And remember, the volley is hitting the ball out of the air. So you're not allowed to stand inside this zone like I am here and volley the ball out of the air. To volley the ball, both of your feet need to be outside of the non-volley zone, and the non-volley zone includes this white line. So the foot on the line like this is inside the non-volley zone. Now, you're going to hear a lot of different ways of it being explained out there. Things like, you know, you got to wait till the ball bounces before you can step into the non-volley zone, and other things like that. Those types of ways of looking at it are ways that will lead to an incorrect conclusion or may confuse you. Think about it this way only. Did I volley the ball? Yes or no? If the ball bounced and I hit it, that's a ground stroke. There was no volley. The rule cannot have been violated. If you did volley the ball, that means you hit it in the air. Then the next question is, were you inside the non-volley zone or outside the non-volley zone when you hit the ball? If you volleyed the ball and you're outside the non-volley zone, no fault. If you volleyed the ball and you were inside the non-volley zone, that would be a fault. Now, in terms of calling faults when you're playing out there, what we recommend is call a fault only if it's so egregious that anybody on the court would agree that there was a fault. So for example, somebody hit the ball like this, call a fault. If you see that somebody maybe went like this and hit the ball, our recommendation is just to let that slide for now, worry about that later. There's some other intricacies on the non-volley zone rule, but as long as you understand that, generally speaking, you cannot volley the ball from inside the non-volley zone, you'll have enough information to get started right.